We are in, gospel-wise, we're back into the Gospel of Mark, and we'll be in Mark until Advent starts. In the epistles, we're changing over from Ephesians to some readings from James for the next few weeks, so we get our little sample of that. Of course, we have our psalm that will follow our Old Testament reading, but our Old Testament reading is going from the narratives of the rise of the monarchy, where last we heard it, Solomon had dedicated the temple. And this week, we veer off into what some people call the Song of Solomon. I'm going to talk more about that here shortly. So the first reading is from what we call, even the name of the book is controversial. The first words in the book are the Songs of Songs, the Song of Songs, which is a way, the Hebrew way of saying the greatest song or the best song ever. That's what it's supposed to be. The best song ever, the greatest song. And people have associated Solomon with it for so long. There's no evidence for that Solomon has anything to do with this book, by the way. The book itself, if you have not read the song, some people just call it songs, the Song of Songs. Good luck finding it. It's typically in the poetical and wisdom section of the book. You'll find, you'll have your Job, of course, and then Job goes into the Psalms, and then you get your Ecclesiastes, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, Lamentations, I think is probably in there somewhere. But the last book of that section in our Protestant Bible is the song, sometimes called the Song of Solomon. The very first verse says, "The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's." Okay. We talked a few weeks ago about Solomon's request of God. God gave Solomon wisdom. Because of his tradition of wisdom, all wisdom writings were seen to have come from him, which isn't to say he wrote them, but when you are an icon of that magnitude in the realm of wisdom, you could to say that you're writing the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's, doesn't mean that Solomon had anything to do with writing it. It could just mean that you're inspired by the wisdom of Solomon. The Proverbs are the same way. So the authorship wasn't necessarily what they're trying to convey. Honor, respect. It's like you got to give it up to the one who did it the best. I'm going to give this up. I'm going to give up this song to the guy who had the biggest. Solomon, this is right down your alley, bud. Yeah, that kind of thing. We are not trying to we're not trying to get Solomon to see him as the person who penned this, okay? Why? Well, it just makes no sense. If you read the book of the Song of Songs, you will find out very quickly, wow, this is pretty racy stuff. And it is. It is love poetry. Love, exciting and new. Come aboard, yes, the Love Boat, the Song of Songs. It has a lot of very erotic language in it. It is something that's sometimes the female is speaking, sometimes the male is speaking. In our passage today, we have the voice of the female speaking. Chapter 2, verses 8 to 13. "The voice of my beloved, look, he comes. leaping upon the mountains, bounding over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing in at the windows, looking through the lattice. My beloved speaks and says to me. Okay, so in this poem, she's equating her lover with this stag, this male deer, and now he's gonna speak, okay? This is what you do in poetry, right? Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. This is the young stag speaking to the woman inside the window. For now the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. Which is to say, it's a poetic way of saying the bad times are behind us, the good times are ahead of us. You've heard that expression, winter is coming, from the Game of Thrones. Well, that has all to do with, fear and foreboding, because the time of being easy, the easy times are behind us, the hard times are ahead. Well, this is just the opposite. For now the winter is past. The rain is over and gone. For them, in that culture, the winter was the rainy season. They didn't get the snow, didn't get cold enough for that, but that was the rainy season, okay? The rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth. The time of singing has come. This is the time of year we associate with spring, do we not? Winter is over, spring is coming, spring is springing. That's the reason why we have a lot of weddings in the spring. Oh yes, the June wedding, April, May, June. Yes, gotta get that in there. Gotta get that wedding in there. That's the time for lovers and for love. And the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The turtle dove, I guess, is considered to be a sign of love, an erotic fixture. The fig tree puts forth its figs, and the vines are in blossom. They give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. All of this spoken by the deer through the window. Okay, so what does this have? Why is this in the Bible, we might ask? Good question. Well, when the early church accepted the Hebrew Bible into its canon, it didn't really accept the Hebrew Bible into its canon. What it accepted was the Septuagint. What was the Septuagint? The Septuagint was the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. And whatever the books were that were in it, that's what they went with. There were some books that the Septuagint had that when the Hebrew canon got closed, they did not include. That's what eventually became known as the apocryphal books. This is not one of those, okay? What this is love poetry, and it is secular love poetry. Why is it in the Bible? It is in the Bible because of the tradition that it is of Solomon's, and what the teachers have had to do with it through the ages is allegorize it and say that this description using the common thing of, the man and the woman, we're familiar with love stories. We love love stories. We love love stories. Yes, we do. Well, allegorize it. Israel and Yahweh, or in the Christian vernacular, the church and Christ. The idea being the attachment between the two and the attraction in an idealized way is the same thing that exists between man and woman in that expression of love. Throughout the ages, the early church has had to defend itself in the fact that there's such erotic imagery is powerful, okay? Erotic imagery is powerful. And And it's not wrong to use the power of that to describe the kind of attraction that there should be between Christ and Christ's church and between Yahweh and Yahweh's people. This is a natural outgrowth of a way we would express it as human beings, because we're familiar with these feelings of love and these of attraction and with this, the palpitations. And that's why we love love stories so much. That's why it's in the Bible, is because it celebrates a human emotion that's a gift from God. All good things come from God. This is something that James is going to say later on. And it validates the human experience that we experience of love. I'm not going to say more about that because I can't. I got 3 more things to do, right? 3 more passages. Okay, we're moving on. Psalm 45. Now, Psalm 45, we're not doing the whole psalm. We're only doing verses 1 and 2 and verses 7 through 10. This one is also, this is a little controversial because what it appears to be, it appears like it could be a love song of a marriage between a king and a foreign princess. Well, yeah, really. Who would expect that, right? But it is a celebration of a king's wedding. Who the king is and who the king is marrying are topics for debate. Now, there is a subscript, a superscript before the first verse where it says, "To the leader, according to lilies." We don't know what lilies is. It's probably the name of a melody, a tune, okay? Of the Korahites, a maskil, a love song. So it tells us basically, this is what you would, it's kind of like to, see, what the book of Psalms probably is the songbook of the synagogue. And it has notes in it to the choir master, telling the choir master, put this to this melody. Where did it come from? What is this? It has that kind of stuff. Verses 1 and 2, and then we skip to verses 7 through 10. My heart is stirring with a noble song. Let me recite what I have fashioned for the king. My tongue shall be the pen of a skilled writer. You are the fairest of men. Grace flows from your lips because God has blessed you forever. This is all words. These are all words that are being spoken to the groom, the bridegroom, the king, because this is a king getting married. And so how are you going to describe this king? You're going to use hyperbole. Hyperbole, grand exaggeration. Yes, you are the fairest of men. There is none more gorgeous than you. None more gorgeous than you. You are the fairest of men. Grace flows from you because God has blessed you forever. Okay, that's the reason why a lot of people think that this is speaking of Solomon, and he is David's son, and there's this promise that will always be a Davidic heir. God has blessed you forever. We don't know. The lectionary committee is trying to find something that is going to go with, if you will, the Song of Songs song that we heard earlier. Verses 7 through 10. Your throne, O God, endures forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. You love righteousness and hate iniquity. This is you always got to give it up. Okay, this is this is what makes it worship. Got to give it up to God. Got to give it up to God. Yes, God has blessed you, O King, forever. Yes, you're the most beautiful man ever, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? It's God. It's God's throne that endures forever. A scepter of righteousness. You love righteousness, hate iniquity. Description of God. Ideally, also the description of the king. Although not always does that transpire, not in the stories of the Old Testament. Therefore God, verse 8, therefore God, your God, has anointed you. It kind of looks like the psalmist is referring to the king as God, but yet Yahweh has anointed this. So I was like, we're not 100% sure. This is a tough one. With the oil of gladness above your fellows. All right, this is a way of we've already hyperbolized the beauty of the king. Why not hyperbolize this, right? Verse 9, all your garments are fragrant with myrrh, aloes, and cassia, and the music of strings from ivory palaces makes you glad. When you're king, it's good to be king. It's good to be king. People play you music. Verse 10, king's daughters stand among the ladies of the court. On your right hand is the queen, adorned with the gold of Ophir. Ophir is a place we're not 100% sure where it is, but they seem to get their gold from there. Because you don't get it in Israel. You got to get it from somewhere else. On your right hand is the queen. Okay, yeah. So the psalm is, we're not teaching the whole psalm. If I were to teach the whole psalm, it would take all day. But what we're trying to get here is an expression of, isn't love grand? Isn't love great? Don't we just love love? Okay. I'm going to move on to the New Testament now. James chapter 1. I love this. This is one of the best readings from any epistle ever. Huh? Hope that got to pique your interest there. James 1, verses 17 to 27. All right. Every generous act of giving with every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. Oh. Every generous act of giving, no matter who does it, no matter who's doing the giving, every perfect gift is from above. The Father of lights, God, yes, Father of lights. God created light. Before God created the sun, the moon, the stars, he created light. Day one. No variation of shadow due to change. Our God is that consistent. We get no good. Any good you find in the world, that comes from God. There's no such thing as like, oh, we generated that good from our... No, we get that from God, okay? All we're doing is channeling the good that God makes available, okay? There's no such thing. Don't try to give some people credit and other people blame when there's good and whatever is good is from God, period. In fulfillment of his own purpose, he gave us birth by the word of truth, so that we would become a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Oh, what? Birth by the word of truth? The word of truth? That's awesome. So that we would become a kind of first fruits of his creatures. We've got to hold on to truth, folks. This is the only way we're going to experience being the fulfillment of God's purpose. If we believe lies, if we believe inaccuracies, if we believe things that people are merely telling to get us on their side, guess what? We are missing the boat to fulfill God's purpose. How else will we be the first fruits of his creatures? Unless we believe the truth. Continuing. You must understand this. Let everyone be quick to listen. Oh, isn't that great? Quick to listen. Slow to speak. Oof. Slow to anger. For your anger, I love it. For your anger does not produce God's righteousness. What? I love this. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. A lot of times, the response that comes from out of our mouth comes from anger, and it's spoken, and it means that we haven't been listening quickly. It means we've only been listening for those things that set us off. Don't listen for what just sets you off. The quick listen. Let everyone be quick to listen. Quick to listen, as in like ready to listen. Few people are ready to listen. Very few people are ready to listen because we already know it. We're not actually ready to hear anything because what we're doing is just waiting for the moment to put in our version of the truth. Your anger does not produce God's righteousness. See a lot of anger in the world today. We saw it on January 6th. A lot of anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore, rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. What? Rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness. There's a lot of stuff that we let infect our brains. A lot of it is stuff that we're watching on television that's called news, and it's not. And what is it doing? It's sordidness, and it is producing wickedness. Alternatively, welcome with meekness. What? The implanted word. It's been implanted in us. We have to let that grow. We have to let that spring up from within us. You know what? Maybe my sermon's coming from here. That has the power to save your souls. Oh my goodness. Whew. I'm seeing a sermon here. But be doers of the word and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. I think this writer is somebody who has had a lot of, it seems like he's had experience of being a hearer, not a doer. And that's why I think he's saying it, be careful, that methink the lady doth protest too much. Well, be doers of the word and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. And you know what? When you look at yourself in the mirror, you're supposed to know exactly what you're seeing. You're supposed to remember it for a while. For they look at themselves and, on going away, immediately forget what they were like. Yeah. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. Wow. There's a lot of doing going on. A lot of people are doing a lot of doing, okay? Is the doing something that is coming from, I just lost what I was going to say. Don't be a hearer and not a doer. So the only way you can be blessed in your doing is if you remember who you are. There you go. The only way you can be blessed in your doing is to remember who you are. Don't be one of those people who looks in the mirror and you're just like, I don't remember who I was. What you do will make no difference. Remember who you are and whose you are. This is what my dad told me. If any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues but deceive their hearts, religious, that's a good word. That's what I'm going to preach on. Their religion is worthless. Can you imagine that? Their religion is worthless. Bridling the tongues, deceiving the hearts. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself unstained by the world. I know some people would add, but not if it's favored by that political party. If that political party wants that, then it's got to be wrong. Every perfect gift is from above, according to Scripture. Okay, we got to move on. But yeah, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this. Is what? Don't you want to know the answer to that? Religion that is pure and undefiled. Who doesn't want to know that, right? Care for orphans and widows in their distress. Oh. So have my attention be not on me, but on other people and caring for them. Not questioning, yeah, but they're just lazy and they deserve what they... No. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress. Helping people. This is what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to be the judgers. We're not the people to put judgment on people. That's not us. And to keep oneself unstained by the world. The world will have us believe lies. The world will have us not appreciate who we really are. It will give us an excuse to not be loving. If you really want an excuse to not be loving, that is easily found. True religion. Wow. All right, we're going to move on. I got to move on. Mark chapter 7. Okay, so we've been in John for about 4 or 5 weeks, all that bread of life stuff. We are back in Mark's gospel. Mark is the oldest of the gospels, most likely, based on what we have been able to discern. And we are in chapter 7, in this section where Jesus is still, Mark is trying to demonstrate for us Jesus' popularity, and not just amongst the people, but amongst, he's popular, he ministers to both the Jews and the Gentiles, and in his ministry, he stirs up controversy, and opposition is starting to arise. Okay, that's what we're halfway through. You realize Mark only has 12 chapters, or 16 chapters, right? So we're like 16, yeah. So, and the 16 chapters only 8 verses long. So it's like, well, this is like halfway-ish, okay? In chapter 7, 8. Verses 1 through 8, 14 to 15, and 21 to 23. When the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered around him, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. So Mark's audience is a Gentile audience, and he has to explain Jewish ways a lot, and that's the reason why the next section is in parentheses, where he says, "For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders, and they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe, the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles." FYI is Mark's way of saying it, okay? Today, we would think like, what do you mean? Of course you're gonna wash your hands. We're in a pandemic, for God's sake. Yes, we're going to wash our hands. So this isn't to say we shouldn't wash our hands. It's all about the motivation. What is that? What's behind that? Yes. Should we be clean? Yes. Do we have to worry about God's pleasure in all of that? Okay, continuing. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him. So notice that it was that the Pharisees noticed what Jesus' disciples were doing. So then they went to Jesus and said, hey, we saw this. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands? And he said to them, Isaiah prophesied rightly about you, hypocrites. The word hypocrite means something like play actor, like people who are playing a role. As it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition. When the early church, the earliest Christians were Jewish. They went to synagogue. There arose conflict between the Jews who believed that Jesus was the Messiah and the Jews that did not. The Jews that did not eventually got pushed out of the synagogue, and that's when they had to start their own worshiping congregations. That's how the earliest church got started, was when they got pushed out of the synagogue. Now, they had to defend themselves with regard to, well, why aren't you still being Jewish? Why aren't you still observing these laws? Mark is giving them help here with this interaction that Jesus and his disciples had with the Pharisees, okay? Why do your disciples not live? The people, they honor me with their lips, but their hearts are from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. Jesus here is being very blunt in basically pointing to, don't confuse the ways and traditions that you have developed and have allowed to progress. Don't confuse that with God. The way we have been, the way of the laws of Moses were very specific for a specific reason, and they weren't intended to be something that created separation so much as distinction, okay? I'm not saying that there was a time limit on it, but there was a time when it was valid. Jesus is saying our pathway to God is not checking boxes. Like, oh, we did this, did this, did this, did this. Must be good with God then. This is what Jesus was counteracting. Then he told the crowd again and said to them, listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile. But the things that come out are what defile. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. Yeah. Motivation. What lies in the heart? So, the earliest Christians who had been Jewish, who chose to stop observing the dietary strictures, had to answer for it. Mark's gospel is very intentional in giving them fodder for this is okay. the law of Moses was for a time when we needed that. That's not what's necessary now. And especially if we hold that as the determining thing. God's grace to us doesn't depend on our doing this or that. Now, our experience of God, our experience of good, our experience of blessing, our experience of salvation even, without faith, and faith without works is what? Yeah. Without faith, we're not going to experience that. There's only so much checking of the boxes that's going to work here. For a lot of us, going to church is a big box to check. Mark's gospel holds forth with the words of Jesus that our defilement, that which we produce inside and let out, this is kind of what James was talking about, right? Letting it out. And how do we let it out? Usually it's in verbalization, what we say, the words we use. And how does this show up? It shows up in social media. Can't believe how the kind of stuff people put out in social media. Like, really, this is gonna help people? How's that gonna help people? I don't get that. These passages this week are very difficult in that they're not very unified. But I think it's important that we always keep one thing in mind. What Scripture is supposed to do is to tease us into active thought. It's not supposed to be like, oh, well, there's the answer to your question. No, that's not what it is. It's supposed to tease us into active thought. It's supposed to motivate us to put our nose to the grindstone. And Paul, in another place, said, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Fear and trembling. Work it out. It's going to be work. Yes. And I got to work on my sermon. Hopefully, I'm allowing enough time between now and I'm recording this and when I write my sermon that you won't hear it sound the same. This is my goal. And until next time, blessings.